Welcome to Second Take, the show that focuses on the issues behind the news. A mining law expert has warned that the legal framework for the South African mining industry is replete with problems, which could discourage foreign investment as companies shy away from uncertainty. Mining Weekly editor Martin Creamer tells us more. Welcome, Martin.
Thanks, Shannon.
Can you outline some of the main problems with South Africa's mining legislation, as well as the potential impact this could have on the industry?
Yeah, it's just such a disjointed set of frameworks. And you know, there's acts and there's amended acts, and then the amendment bill, and then the mining charter, and then the code of good practice, and they don't really gel. There are differences between them. So it causes enormous confusion, and nobody is actually putting them all together, but the Department of Trade and Department of Mineral Resources is putting its own interpretation on it, and then that confuses it even more, because that the legal fraternities sometimes differ very strongly with those interpretations. There's been a lot of litigation. You know, they're talking about over 1,000 appeals against, you know, the framework, and the litigation is normally won by the mining companies, and you know, the courts seem to recognize when there are administrative failures, and then they rule against it. Judges rule against it. So there was not one case cited where the government had won. In each case, you know, the companies that had brought this to the court won their cases. So it shows you that there's something wrong with this legislation. And there were, you know, as this hour of talk on this by Hume Scholes rolled out, you could see that he was giving instances of companies that were discouraged from investing and wanting to withdraw from investing, and also it has become a catalyst for people to disinvest. Now that is really serious, because you know, we want the mining industry to really move forward, because it is the flywheel of our economy. Like it or not, our economy hasn't developed sufficiently not to have that as a flywheel. And it's really the flywheel in terms of the exports. You need that export revenue coming in, otherwise your balance of payments gets thrown out. If your balance of payments gets thrown out, you can't grow, because you can't import things, because there's no, you know, foreign exchange to import it with. So it's very, very serious. And it just seems to go from one year to the other and one minister to the next. Too many ministers involved, too many amendments, too many bills, no proper clear vision. Disjointed is probably a kind way of describing it.
And if it's that disjointed, it means people could sort of pick and choose which parts they were going to implement or use against the government. And
they are. You know, they're driving through some of the loopholes with a truck. Because there's just such a lack of clarity. If you do bring it to court, you know, you win your case. Invariably, there was not one case cited where, you know, the companies bringing the case did not win.
Now, as you mentioned, mine law expert Hume Scholes, he also accused the Department of Land Reform and Rural Development of being unhelpful towards traditional communities. Can you elaborate?
Yeah, you know, he was saying that there's now a new curved ball, that not only do you have to have 26% black economic empowerment ownership, but even if you've got that, there's a new part of the law, and it really is somewhere in limbo, this piece, but it's actually law that states that the department can lay down that you've got to give a community that is around the mine 15%, now I presume 15% of the operational asset. So you may have already have a black economic empowerment partner, you know, at the corporate level that has got 26% of your business, but as you get down to the operational level, the law as it stands can be dictatorial in that it could say you must now have a community, near mine community, with 15%, and the Department of Mineral Resources can specify which community. Now, and then when you go to the Department of Rural Development that's closest to these communities, and you ask for guidelines, he says you don't get them, because I presume they don't want to get involved in this, because just now they'll have litigation. And we know that community aspects have been fractious in the past. You know, we know that on the western limb of the Bushveld, where a company brought in a local community and cut them in, actually on a 26% deal, the chieftain died, his son took over. His son was impatient for the cash, you know, because the mine had a 10-year horizon. So he was holding on to the shares on behalf of the community, but he's thinking, gee, 10 years, you know, I don't want to wait that long. And with the assistance of a foreign accomplice, he actually collateralized those shares into cash.
Wow.
And I actually saw this fella, you know, he was in a BMW, he had like Rolexes on both arms, he was really living it up because he had actually got the cash, and instead of concentrating on mining in the area, he actually invested in retail in Sandton. So it was a completely wrong and unintended consequence of community involvement. So it's fraught with problems because you just say the community and think, you know, it's one community, but there are all sorts of different interpretations of what that community is, and the people in it think differently. Some of them thinking long term, some of them thinking short term, and you can end up, as they did in that platinum case, with serious problems of people getting their hands on that cash way ahead of time and then just spending it in the way they saw fit because they happen to be at the center of control.
Now, Glencore CEO Ivan Glassenberg has said that smart governments will encourage foreign investment. What should government be doing to ensure this?
You know, I think that Ivan hit the nail on the head when he was questioned by the media this week. They had a media conference in Johannesburg, and he allowed himself to be questioned. And the issue of, you know, the legislative framework and then the declaration of coal as strategic came up. Now, he's a major coal bull. You know, Glencore mines a lot of coal here. And they were saying, you know, isn't this going to interfere with your business? And I think he was very logical in the way he outlined that, you know, if he cannot get the return that is required, obviously it will inhibit further investment. You know, you'll go along with his existing mines, but it's going to inhibit further investment. And then if an opportunity comes up where the local return from the coal project doesn't match something else, you know, you're obliged for your shareholders to go elsewhere. So he's saying that smart governments, you know, make sure that foreign investors do not have big obstacles, because he said, what do foreign investors do? They give you massive wads of cash. They then, you know, normally operate at quite a good profit, and you get very good taxes, a wonderful tax flow. The wage bill is huge. You're getting royalties. You know, most of these big companies these days, they really look after their staff as well, and they look after the community. So, you know, all boats are floated with foreign investment, particularly in a country like South Africa, which is fairly mature, you know, has the tax laid down, so every bit of mineral that's mined is taxed. And he's saying, look, be smart, because looking ahead, Eskom is unlikely to have the funding to build the coal mines that it needs. You know, they're supplying Eskom with about 20 million tons of coal a year, and they're one of the big four doing it. They're also the biggest exporter, and they've got the biggest allocation at Richards Bay. That's Glencore. So they're saying, you know, we want to carry on mining. In fact, we back you all the way. We are going through with our prospect rights. We're turning them to account. We've got projects. We're rolling out new mines. We've spent, they spoke of between $3 billion and $4 billion in the last 3 years. So that's, you know, up to 40 billion rands worth of investment we've put there. And we the indications are that Eskom is not going to be able to do this. It needs someone to invest so that it can get that coal, and that is obviously true. I don't think South Africa can afford to go into these big ventures. So smart governments must realize that foreign investors are very valuable, and they must allow them to put in these huge wads of capital. And don't make it too difficult for them, because otherwise, if their returns are below what their shareholders are demanding, they've got to go to other ventures, and then the country loses out. The country loses out big time on jobs, on tax, and governments have got got to realize that they actually may be sabotaging people down the line. They're sabotaging the communities. They're sabotaging the citizens by obstructing foreign investors with red tape and all sorts of difficulties, and sometimes making it impossible. What these companies are saying, we will give you that coal. We want to oblige. We want to roll out every project we can. We believe in coal. We're coal bulls. This thermal coal situation, we also marketers. We are making good profits. Let us plow our capital in for a win-win situation. And then you will be smart as government. And I think he made a very good point. Ivan Glazenberg, who of course is South African born. And there are a lot of South Africans within that company that make them understand, what is going on here. And I think that they are very accommodating of the government. And you can hear from their approach that they're saying to the government, we will do everything you need. They're saying to Eskom, we're four square behind you. And that's what Eskom needs at the moment.
And that's why legislation is so important, to get that right.
So if you have the wrong legislation and they come up with a very onerous framework for coal, saying it's strategic and that you must give us certain quantities of coal at a certain price, I think it's going to lower the returns. If it lowers the returns below the hurdle, shareholders will force these people to go to the best investment, and then they leave you out of that loop, and it can really hurt the people of South Africa. I've had 3 days without power, and I promise you, I love electricity at the moment. I'll do anything for electricity. I mean, when you can't make a cup of coffee, you can't open your gates, you can't open your garage doors, nothing works. Your cell phone can't be charged. You're like really in the dark, and you're sitting there. It's good for meditation, but really you start meditating on how much you need this electricity. And if someone is going to pay to mine that coal, and it costs a lot of money, and to get it to Eskom, for heaven's sake, roll out the red carpet for these foreign investors. We need them. We really desperately need their input. And if a government is smart and wants to make sure that a democracy works, and we're still a young democracy, you have to have economic growth. And these investments can allow for that economic growth. Then you can get the taxes, and you can do the things that you've promised in the poorer areas. And you can do what the Constitution is demanding, because you'll have the cash, and then you'll stay in power longer.
Well, thank you very much, Martin.
It's a great pleasure, Shannon.
That's it for today. Join us again next week for more news analysis on South Africa's mining industry.